all the latest on the SaWGuy podcast, be sure to subscribe and don't forget that bell icon.
Yeah, running scared.
Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, y'all know I am the SaWGuy, and today is special. Today we are celebrating the Saw. That's right, today is Thanksgiving, and you can't talk about Thanksgiving without talking about family. And what's family to me? Well, the Saw is family. So sit back, relax, enjoy that second helping of turkey, mashed taters, pumpkin pie, and let's get this shit started.
And welcome to the SaWGuy podcast.
I ain't no fucking clown.
That is better.
Now clear your minds. He knows what scares you.
I'm just gonna bash your brains.
What the hell? The boogeyman is real, and you found him. What do you want?
I want to hear you scream.
Hell. Everybody loves popcorn.
As I said, you can't talk about Thanksgiving without talking about one of the most famous horror films of all time. And I'm talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I know a lot of you guys are probably thinking, how the hell does that tie into Thanksgiving? Well, let me tell you what I think about this film. I think this film is more Thanksgiving oriented, plus, it's more summer oriented as well. But I think of it as Thanksgiving because this is a time where you're thankful for family, you would do anything for family, and, in a way, the whole Sawyer family in this film, they're exactly like that. I mean, other than the fact that they like to eat a lot of meat, but it ties it all in, So, as I said, with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I guess you could say this film is very unique and still holds up to this day because it was the very first film that started the whole slasher genre. If you think about it, it's the Mac Daddy, granddaddy of them all. Because in 1974, when this film was released, everybody was all shocked when they saw this because of the fact that, they played off the whole Hitchcock method where it's like, oh, based on the bizarre incidents that happened in Texas, this film's too brutal for you to see. And at that time, that's how everybody was doing it because Hitchcock made it famous with Psycho. And, it's when people went to go see this film, they walked out, and everybody has their own story with this, like, oh, I saw him saw off his face, I saw him, gut this person up, and this and that, Interestingly enough, this film has very little to almost no blood in this film. Granted, there is some graphic scenes, but there's no blood with it, which is crazy, And what I love about this film is that it's so iconic, and because of it being iconic, later on you had the sequels. They've already done, 2 different remakes, soon to be a third one. Actually, they did a third remake already, a TV-made film. But this film, I really do love this. I mean, if you've never heard of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I would suggest go check this out because it's one of those films that, to this day, it still holds up. And don't be afraid. Honestly, it's all implied of what's going on. I mean, and that's the thing that kind of makes it scary for most people. Less is more, basically, But with this film, I'm going to break it down for you like I always do in every episode, throwing all the tidbits and stuff like that. So, let's get this rolling, right? By the way, save me a piece of pumpkin pie. If not, I'm going to come after you with this damn chainsaw right here. But anyways, Texas Chainsaw, it takes place obviously in the 70s, 1974, right, in August. And it follows this, group of teens, and they're driving down the highway. But before it starts that, you hear this narration of, this is the most brutal, bizarre crime scene that ever happened in the United States of America. And, it explains, Sally and Franklin, they were out there for a summer drive, and they did not expect what they were expecting. This is called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And so it shows that there's a dead armadillo on the road in this van. This Ford Econo van, passes it by. And a group of these kids, they're in the car, in the van, they're driving. They pull over to the side, and one of the guys, he's handicapped. And, he pulls them out and everything, puts the rails on. Because at the time in the 70s, you didn't have the ADA Act. So you didn't have anything that helped out the disability. So if you were in a wheelchair and you had to get in and out of a van, you had to use, fucking particle board, to roll them out. Which was like, what the hell? It goes to show how much times have changed, right? So they wheel him out and everything, and he's got to go to the bathroom. And instead of, doing his business or whatever, they give him a coffee can, he's sitting there, and then all of a sudden this big ass truck comes by full force, And, you know, if you ever been on the highway stuck on the road and a car comes that fast, let alone a fucking semi-truck, that shit's gonna have force to push you back. So what did it do? It pushed, you know, the guy in the wheelchair down the hill. He rolls down. And, you know, what I was thinking, I was watching this film so many times for this episode. I was like, man, that coffee can filled with pee, he just throws it up in the air, splashes everybody with hella piss. But anyways, he goes down there and he's all flipping out, he's all pissed off. And they go and help him up and they start driving. And the reason being why that they're driving is because when the film also starts, you see a cutscene of, you know, dead bodies. And then you hear these lights going off like an old school camera. And it shows the dead, decomposed bodies. Well, there's one that's hanging over a gravestone like this, and you hear like the radio announcer like talking about, oh, there's grave robberies. People who have families that are, you know, buried here should come and double check to make sure it wasn't their families that were, you know, being messed with. So that was the whole reason I assumed for this trip, because, you know, they never explained what they were going out of town for, what they were driving around for. But anyways, these kids, they go and they stop. And then you go and meet Marilyn Burns' character. Her name is Sally. She comes out of the car. And, you know, she starts, you know, talking to everybody that's there at the cemetery. They're, you know, local boys, so they're like, oh, we're watching over here just in case if anyone's trying to fuck with any of these. And if your granddaddy's in there, you gotta talk to the sheriff over there. So the sheriff comes in and he tells, you know, her boyfriend. And, you know, he's telling her boyfriend, like, hey fella, sorry, I'm gonna borrow your little gal over here. Come on. And he tells, all right, let's go find your granddad, see where he's at. And apparently he was buried near where they put, like, the whole corpse over the grave. And, you know, they implied that, but they never said anything much, right? So they get back in the van and they start driving. Then you meet all the other characters, right? So Sally is your main character, played by Marilyn Burns. Then you also have her friend, Pam, who's played by Terry McMinn. Then you also have Pam's boyfriend in here, right? His name is Kirk, and he's played by William Vail. Then you meet the guy who's, you know, bound to the wheelchair. That's actually Sally's brother. His name's Franklin. He's played by the actor Paul Parton. Then you meet Sally's boyfriend, Jerry, who's played by Alan Danziger. So there are a bunch of these group of kids, you know, their boyfriend, girlfriend, they're all out having a good time, you know, and Franklin, he's one of those... If you ever had, you know, a lot of siblings in the family, you know, Franklin is the younger sibling that, like, has to tag along with everything, and that's what it's implied here, where he's like, oh, I want to go with you guys, too. Ah, fuck. All right, come on. So that's how Franklin's involved in this whole story. So as they're driving down, then they start talking about everything, like, wow, you know, and then they start talking about horoscopes, you know, because this is the 70s. They had this little 8-track radio in there, and, you know, they're listening to music, they're all bored, it's a hot Texas summer, they had these little windows open. I call them the dog windows because back in the day, man, you know, windows didn't roll down. You had to open a crack, and it was like that much. If you wanted fucking air, man, you had to put your face through it, like suck in the air if you were lucky enough, right? So they're driving down, and they start talking and everything, and then they start smelling this weird smell, and then Franklin's like, hey, that's the old cattle farm over there. Remember over there, Sally? That's where Grandpa used to go and sell all his cattle. And, you know, he's explaining things. And then they see this weird hitchhiker, right? And when they see him, they're like, well, why the hell is he out here? It's, you know, almost 1,000 degrees. Let's go pick him up. And they're all like, no, he looks weird. So they pick up this hitchhiker, right? And, you know, he comes in, and he's played by Edwin Neal. And Edwin Neal, his character, he's never given a name. He's just known as the hitchhiker, right? So he's sitting in there, and they're just staring at him like, you know, like, what the hell is weird? This guy's a little off somewhere. And so he starts talking about, like, different things, like, oh, yeah, you know, I used to work over there at that cow house, you know? And Franklin's all talking to him. He's like, don't they use a gun no more? He goes, no. It took jobs away from people, you know. You gotta smash them in the head. So he's, you know, telling the whole story that he's like, you want to see some pictures? And he pulls it out of this little satchel bag that he has. And they're looking through, and they're like, what the fuck? And then all of a sudden, Franklin, you know, he has this little pocket knife. He's playing with this shit. He pulls it out, and then he's like, ooh. And then he cuts the shit out of his hand for no reason. They're like, what the fuck? Then he takes a picture of Franklin, and then he's like, here's this picture. $2 for you. And he's like, no, I'm not going to buy that. And everyone's like, what the fuck? And they're sitting right in front of him. This guy's weird. What the hell is he doing? So, you know, he gets the picture, puts it on foil, puts gunpowder, burns it, and then wraps it up. And then he pulls out, you know, his old school, you know, Sweeney Todd razor barber, you know, the ones that they use to shave. He goes and attacks Franklin. And they're like, what the fuck? So they stop, they pulled over, and, you know, after that, they kicked him out. And as they kicked him out, they're driving off. You know, he's rubbing the blood all over on the fucking van and everything like that and screaming. After that, they're all like, that guy's a fucking weirdo. They stop for gas. And at this point, you know, this is ties in with the whole 70s gas crisis where, you know, most gas stations out in the rural areas, they couldn't get gas. So they stop. And this is where, you know, they meet one of the guys who was running the gas stop. You know, he also has a barbecue joint. And, you know, they said, okay, well, can you fill her up? He's like, I ain't got no gas. It's like, what? How the hell you're the only gas station here? Like, how do you not have no gas? Well, you know, they're coming later on, but I ain't got no gas. And so he's like, if you want to stay, I got some nice tasty barbecue out here in the back. And so they're like, nah. So they, you know, they go and do the bathroom breaks and shit like that. And then Franklin asks, like, hey, do you know where the old farm's at? And they're like, why do you want to know? He's like, oh, well, our granddaddy owns it, so we're going to go over there and stop, you know, and see how it looks. And he's like, well, you shouldn't go out there. You know, that place is condemned, and, you know, they wouldn't like people going out over there. And Franklin, you know, he just ignores it and says, well, it's our granddaddy's, he owns it, we're going to go there either way. Fuck you. So they take the drive out there in this middle of nowhere, you know, so they flip back, they go around these little side routes, they stop, and they all get out of the car so that way they can all go and check out everything, right? So you see Pam and Kirk, they go off their own way, and then, you know, Jerry, he helps out Franklin, and then you see Jerry with Sally, you know, they all go their own separate ways. And so Franklin, he goes into one of the shacks that's on the property, and he's like, I'm having a good time. Right, Franklin, you should come. You're like, he's being stupid, you know, he's just all irritated. Then you see Jerry and Sally where they're kind of going around talking about, wow, this place is crazy. Like, how do you guys all remember this? You didn't want to live here? You know, asking all those kinds of questions. Then later on you see Pam and Kirk, they're kind of going around and they're, you know, walking around the whole farm property and everything. They're like, wait a minute, that's a generator over there. So they go and they hear this generator that's powering this, you know, empty house. And afterwards, you know, he's, he tells Pam, he's like, okay, well, you know, sit on the side over here. Let's go check and see if there's anybody in the house. They open the door. There's nobody in there. So as she's sitting down on the porch, you know, he sees his tooth. He picks it up and he's like, hey, I got a gift for you. He drops a fucking human tooth on her and she's like, oh, fuck that. So she goes and sits down on this little swing that's right there, like this little porch swing. And he's like, all right, I'm gonna go double check and see what's going on inside. So, you know, Kirk, he goes in there and, you know, he hears this pig squeal. Wee, wee, wee. He's like, hello? He goes in there and, you know, he trips over this little ramp that's going into the hallway. Out comes out of nowhere, you see this guy in this fucking, like, leather mask, and obviously his name's Leatherface. He comes out with a big-ass hammer, like, and then he just whacks the fuck out of him in the head. Bam! And he goes down automatically. I mean, anybody would. And he's, you know, at the point where he got hit in the head so hard, he's starting to seize up. You know, and as he's doing that, they show his body, like, twitching. And then, you know, he hits him a couple of times. He picks him up, and he slams the door. Then that's when you hear the noise outside. And so Pam's like, Kirk! So she goes in, and she starts snooping around, and then eventually she goes into other rooms. She starts seeing all these weird-ass things, you know? You see, like, skeletons, like, rib bones and shit all taped together, like in butterflies. You see them kind of like wind chimes and everything. And interestingly enough, this film had such a low budget that they didn't use, like, fake skeletons. A lot of those skeletons in there, they were real skeletons that they bought from India because it was cheaper to do that than to buy, like, plastic ones and kind of make it their own way. So they bought real skeletons, and a lot of that was all, like, the production team that designed it, which was pretty cool, right? So as she sees all that, she's freaking out. She comes out, then Leatherface, you know, he hears her, and he's like, whoa! You know, and he starts chasing after her. You know, she runs out, and then he grabs her from behind, and then he's, like, dragging her in. As he drags her in, all of a sudden, you know, he goes into the kitchen area. There's a big-ass meat hook. What does he do? He picks her up, smacks her right on the meat hook, and she's just screaming, because she's stuck. You know, and they don't show anything. It's all implied. It's all done off camera. It shows the meat hook, and then it shows he drops her on there, and she's already hanging. You know, and that's more terrifying than actually seeing what's going on, right? So after that, he has like a fork. He throws it in the sink. He gets his chainsaw, you know, pumps it up a couple of times. And if you know anything about chainsaws, you got to pump it a couple of times to get the fuel injection going. And then, you know, you rev it one time. And then you got to rev it a couple of times to warm it up. So he gets it going, and he lifts it all up, and he's going all crazy and everything like that. Then it shows that Kirk's laid out on this slab table, and then it's implied that he's like cutting them. In this scene, though, what's cool is that it looks like he's cutting him, but he's not. He's just got the chainsaw really close to his face. You know, even the actor said, yeah, he goes, man, if I would have coughed or sneezed or anything, there would have gone my whole face. So it shows all that, right? So after all that, you see Franklin, you see Jerry, and then you see Sally. They're back at the van there, and they're calling out for Kirk, and they're calling out for Pam. And they're basically saying, where the hell are they? So they're calling out for Pam and Kirk. Pam! Kirk! And they're just waiting there. And eventually it starts to sunset and everything like that. And then Jerry's like, you know what? I'm going to go and take a look and see what's going on. So, you know, they said, okay, well, you stay here. You watch over Franklin, you know, just make sure he's okay. And here's the thing. Here's the kicker. He goes and leaves, and he doesn't leave the fucking keys just in case if something happens, right? It was the 70s. It was a different time, you know? So he goes and walks over, and as it's still sunset, and he's calling out for their name. Kirk! Pam! Where the hell are you guys? He gets to the house finally, and as he goes through in the house, you know, nobody's in there. And he starts looking around things. Then all of a sudden he goes into the kitchen area, and he hears this noise like in the freezer. He's like, what the fuck? He goes and runs open to it, and he opens it, and it's Pam, and she's like laid out and everything. And then she wakes up like jumping over him. And the reason why she wakes up and jumps over him is just because it's an impulse thing. I mean, if you get hit in the head so many times, your body just twitches. So she twitched out and reached over, and he started screaming, oh! And then Leatherface comes over. And what I love about Leatherface is played by GUNNAR HANSEN, and he's not a small dude. I met him in person, and you can see why if you ever got a chance to meet him in person. Rest in peace, by the way. If you've ever met him in person, he's a big individual. I mean, he's tall, like he's built like a refrigerator, and they show it in this scene, and it has nothing to do with camera angles. You can tell the size difference. He comes in, and he's like, oh, and he has the hammer and hits the shit out of him in the face like one time, and he was out, and he starts freaking out. And he closes the freezer and everything, and he goes, looks out the window, and then he starts hearing like the clocks go off and everything, and he's hitting his head, and he's like, And it's implied with Leatherface is that he's not all there, you know? And what's crazy is that Tobe Hooper, he designed the character, obviously, but he gave GUNNAR HANSEN the full control on how to develop him. And when GUNNAR HANSEN, developed him, he basically said, okay, I want him to be mentally disabled. He can understand things, but he has to be mentally incapacitated in some ways where he can't speak. He doesn't understand thought process and some things like that. And what, GUNNAR HANSEN did is that he actually went to go sit in on a bunch of handicap facilities just to kind of observe these people, what do they do, how do they tick, and things like that. And at the same time, he wanted to do it in a way where it ties into the character, but he doesn't want to be offensive. And I love that for this film, because I'm just like, holy shit, that's really cool. He really took this character above and beyond and made an icon out of it, And at the same time, at cons, if you ever got a chance to meet him, he recently passed away, back in 2015, unfortunately. But at cons, he would basically come out and say, well, I did my best. I didn't want to offend anybody. I wanted to design the character in a way that would be, creepy in a way. And at the same time, he didn't understand what he was doing. And, he hit it, nail on the board on that one. And GUNNAR HANSEN made an icon with Leatherface. But anyways, now it's starting to be nightfall. And you see Franklin, Franklin and Sally, they start talking. They're all like, okay, well, they're not going to come. And Franklin, he's freaking out. So he's honking the horn. Where are you guys at? Honking the horn. And then all of a sudden, he's trying to start the car, and he's like,
Sally,
they took the keys! They took the keys! Sally, they took the keys! And she's trying to calm him down, where she's like, calm down! I'm gonna go out and go look for him. Give me the flashlight! So they're struggling about the flashlight, because they're brother and sister, sibling rivalry, right? And so, he's like, no, I don't want you to go. I can't stay here by myself. No, they give me the flashlight. Fine, I don't need the flashlight. He's like, okay, Sally, wait, Sally! And so, he's pushing his wheelchair, trying to follow her. She's like, all right, come on. And so, she's walking all fast because she's pissed. He's like, tell her, hey, you need to slow down. I can't keep up. Sally. And they implied that, Franklin, he was the younger brother. Obviously, he looked older than her. But somewhere in the movie, they did say that he was younger than her. And she was just kind of irritated that she had to bring him along with a lot of things, right? I don't think so much for the disability. It was just because if you watch this film, you see he has that, that youngest sibling, self-entitled kind of attitude where, he's like, why do we got to do this? Why do we got to do that? That kind of attitude. And if you have siblings, y'all know where I'm coming from, I'm the only boy out of 3 sisters. I got 2 younger sisters, and they did the same exact thing, so I know where it's coming from with this. And so anyways, now they're going through the whole woodsy area on the property, and, they're calling out their names. Pam! Kirk! Jerry! Jerry! You know, and she's pushing him eventually behind, and he's holding the flashlight. Then they stop for a second, then he's like, Sally, wait, Sally, hold on.
Stop.
I heard a noise.
Stop.
And all of a sudden you hear the chainsaw start, wow! And then fucking Leatherface comes out, and he fucking chainsaws him right in half, and then he puts it right into him. And I love the sound effects that they did, because obviously, you know, off screen, he was just moving the chainsaw around. But then there was a scene where he had to put it like right through on the side and make it look like it was going through him. It was a great fucking scene. And the whole thing about this film, they used that real chainsaw and everything. They had a real chain on it. They didn't take the chain off, you know. And after that's going on, Sally's like freaking out, screaming, ah! And I love this aspect because they zoom in on her face, like different shots where it's like boom, 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 boom. So it shows like the signs of terror. She starts running through the whole forest and everything like that. And as she's running through, that's where like random shit starts going down. She sees the house, they run through the house and everything like that. And after that, then she runs back into the forest and she's running. And you know, it's implied they're fucking far out. She's been running at least for an hour from Leatherface. Eventually she gets back to the gas station, and you know, that's when Leatherface like stops, and then she's, you know, sees the old man there. And the old man ends up being Drayton Sawyer. The name Sawyer, I love this name because a lot of people will easily remember it. It's a play on the words. It's a play on saw her, Sawyer. And the way they spell it, S-A-W-Y-E-R, Sawyer, but it's a play on saw her. They came out and said that too. And after Leatherface had left, then all of a sudden, you know, you see Sally, she's talking to Drayton. She's like, no, there's a guy out there with a chainsaw. He's gonna kill me. He's gonna kill me. He's like, no, don't worry about a thing, little there, darling. I'm gonna go ahead and I'll take care of this right now. You just stay put right here. And so he, you know, he makes her sit there. She's listening to like some radio on the AM radio on the corner. And as she's looking around, she sees the barbecue. And you know what I love about this scene, if you look at the barbecue scene, you see that they have all the embers burning, but it shows like different body parts. You see like a large intestine hanging. You see like a torso hanging, and it's like, oh shit. And it clicks now that they're all in this, right? And all of a sudden Drayton comes up with the truck with the burlap sack. He's like, all right, you need to go easy here, little darling. She's like, no, and they start fighting. And she picks up, you know, this butcher knife. He's like, oh, take it easy. And what I love about this, he gets a fucking Dollar Tree, you know, cheap-ass bristle broom, and he knocks it out of her hand, and he beats the shit out of her with it. It's to the point where he beats her down that it breaks in half, and she's knocked out. And so, you know, he turns her around, he ties her up with a rope, and then he wraps her in the burlap sack, and then he puts her in the truck, and they start driving back. And then he's like, oh, don't worry, darling. We'll take care of you. You know, he gets there, and then all of a sudden you see the hitchhiker come in. You find out they're all in this, but you don't know that they're family yet. Eventually you find out, because Drayton comes in, you know, and he's like, you old damn coot, what the hell did I tell you to do? Why are you out here so late? You're supposed to be watching your brother. You can't leave him alone here at the house. So he tells the hitchhiker to bring in Sally. He brings in Sally. And then when he goes, look what your brother did to this goddamn door. Where the hell is he? Then you see Leatherface. And Leatherface, he's wearing like an old lady mask. And it's implied that Leatherface, he doesn't like his face, so he wears different masks. So he's wearing this old lady face. And, you know, he's telling him, like, what the hell did you do? Why did you do that to the door? And then Leatherface, you know, he's trying to talk. He had some dialogue in this film, but they actually kind of turned it into gibberish, where he's trying to talk, but he doesn't talk. So he's like, you sure? You sure? So I guess they were talking about if there was any more people coming around the area. And then afterwards, he's like, okay, but look what you did to this damn door. And he starts hitting them and everything like that. Then you see the hitchhiker, he takes, you know, Sally to the side. And after he takes the burlap sack off of her, then all of a sudden he's like, I know who would like this. We need to get Grandpa. So they run up the stairs and everything, and they get the Grandpa. And you see the Grandpa earlier in the scene where she's running through the house and everything. And, you know, it looks like he's dead, you know, because he's just sitting there like this. And that's actually an actor inside that whole makeup, everything. The actor's name was John Dugan. And so, you know, he plays the Grandpa. The Grandma's already dead because she's already skeletons. But the Grandpa, he still had a lot of flesh on him, and he's just sitting there. So the hitchhiker goes in there, and, you know, he brings out his Grandpa because he's on one of those rolling chairs. So he rolls him to the edge over there, on the edge of the stairs, and he tells him, hey, I need your help, you know. And so him and Leatherface, they're carrying down their Grandpa down. And then all of a sudden you see Drayton, he's like, oh, you're gonna love this. Grandpa's always been the best, and Grandpa's dying to meet you. Kind of very reminiscent to Thanksgiving in a way, right? So anyways, you know, they bring him down, and then all of a sudden, you know, he's just sitting right there, and they're all like, okay, let Grandpa have a taste. So they cut her finger, and they put her finger in his mouth, and he starts sucking her blood, and, you know, from all the craziness, she just passes out. And so when she passes out, they see that they're all sitting down at the table, and she wakes up, and then she sees, you know, Leatherface, you know, he's wearing a different mask. He's wearing his pretty lady mask, where it's a woman's mask, basically. And, you know, it's all painted up with makeup. You see, you know, the hitchhiker on the other side with Drayton, and then you see Grandpa at the edge of the table, and she's on the far edge. She wakes up, she starts screaming, ah! Ah! And it does the whole scene where it shows, like, various different shots of her eyes and her face, like, screaming in terror. And then it does, like, all the camera sounds. And, you know, they're all looking at her like, huh? And then they start, you know, fucking with her and screaming, going, oh! Oh! They start talking about all that, and then she's like, you don't have to do this to me. I'll do anything to get out of this. And the hitchhiker, you know, he starts talking about the family, where he's like, well, me and him, we do all the killing over here. He, right here, he's just the cook. And then Drayton gets all pissed off, where he's like, oh, you need to back off on there, boy. Just some things a man can't do. And killing, I ain't a man of doing that. And so he's like, if you're gonna get to the killing, get to it now. And he gets up and he starts to walk out, you know, because he thinks that they're gonna torture her and everything, and then finally kill her. And then as they're still torturing her, he comes in and he's like, just get with the damn killing already. Then he's like, wait a minute, you know. And the hitchhiker, he basically replies, he's like, let's give Grandpa a whack. You know, you always said Grandpa's the best. He's like, that's a good idea. So they wheel over the Grandpa, and, you know, they pull Sally to the side. She's still tied down to the chair. The hitchhiker, you know, he unties her and everything, and they get this big ass, you know, galvanized steel bucket, you know, the ones they use for bombing for apples and shit. And, you know, he lays her head down there, and she's screaming, fighting, and he's like, okay, give Grandpa the hammer, give him the hammer. So they give him this big ass sledgehammer, and he's just throwing it, and he's missing every time. So eventually, like, Leatherface, you know, he's helping him, guiding his hand, throwing it, and he's missing every time. Well, eventually, you know, he hits her once, boom, and she's like all dazed and going down, but she's still fighting. And he gets it again, where he, you know, he's throwing it, he misses a couple of times. Then eventually he gets her again. And then all of a sudden, you know, at this point where they're like trying to put the hammer in Grandpa's hand, like, you know, trying to guide it and everything like that. Then all of a sudden, you know, she gets up and she goes, like pushes all of them out, and, you know, gets up and she fucking runs. She jumps out of the window. And as she jumps out of the window, she's, you know, sees that it's daylight. She's like, And what I want to know is, what's so crazy is that the actor, you know, Marilyn Burns, she did all this in fucking platform sandals. Like, holy shit. You know, like, because it was the summer, so they're all wearing sandals and shit. And she fucking ran out with these platform sandals, like, you know, getting the fuck out of there. As she's running out, no! And she's still dazed, because, you know, she got hit in the head, you know, a bunch of times already with this fucking sledgehammer. And all of a sudden you see the hitchhiker, he runs out chasing after her. Then you see Leatherface coming out, you know, and he starts running after her. So both of them are chasing after her. She finally gets out at the end of the road, you know, right into the freeway, it looks like. And as, you know, she's running out, she sees this big truck driver, you know, this big ass truck. I guess it's carrying cattle or horses or something. And he's honking, and, you know, then you see the hitchhiker with this old ass razor blade, and he's like cutting on her back and everything. And then he's like stabbing into her. And then all of a sudden he doesn't stop to see, and she just bolts out of the way. Split second, you know, the truck driver, he runs over the fucking hitchhiker, and she's like, you know, because she saw all this shit happen. And as she's running up to the truck driver, you see Leatherface coming, ooh, you know, with his chainsaw and shit. And, you know, the truck driver, he comes out, and the name of the truck was the Black Maria. And I laugh at that, because when they re-released this film on DVD, they did the Black Maria edition where you could build up the truck and shit as like a DVD case. But that part was so iconic in this film because it was the ending. So this big dude, he gets out of the truck, you know, and he's a big fella himself. He comes out, and, you know, he's pulling his head, shaking his head, and then all of a sudden he sees her getting chased with a chainsaw. He's like, oh, hell no! He jumps back in the truck, you know, and, you know, he's sitting on there, he grabs both of her hands, pulls her in, closes the door right away, and then Leatherface is like trying to chop through the door. They get out on the other side, and then he's like, oh, hell no. He sees this big-ass, you know, pipe wrench, and he grabs it. They start running from the other side, trying to run back. Eventually, Leatherface catches on, so he runs around. And then all of a sudden, you know, he's chasing after him, and then Sally, she's already way ahead of him. He stops for a second, throws this wrench, and it smacks him square in the face. And you actually hear it, too. You know, Leatherface, he just dazed, and he falls back. As he falls back, you know, he's still holding the chainsaw on the handle, so it's still cutting. and when he drops back and lays down on the ground, it cuts the fuck out of his leg. Interestingly enough, that scream was real because what they did, they used the real chainsaw to cut through the pants, but they put like a metal plate that was like, you know, attached to his leg so that way it wouldn't cut through. But because the chainsaw running so hot, it cut through, you know, the fake blood pouch, and it was, you know, burning up the metal plate, and the metal plate burned like super quick that Gunnar Hansen was screaming, ah! Because that was real. And when he gets up, you see that he squeezes the blood pouch to, you know, for more effect. As that went on, you see another, you know, truck come by, and then he flips over a U-turn. It was an old Chevy truck, you know. These old ass Chevy trucks, man, they took forever to start. So the guy flipped it over, and it's a stick. So when he flipped it over, he dropped the clutch. So he's trying to start it, and he's doing that. You see the dude from the Black Maria truck, he just fucking bolts. He doesn't even stop. He just keeps running the other end. And they never explain what happened to him. He just fucking took off. And while that's going on, Sally, you know, she's like slowly crawling up. She gets onto the back of the bed of the truck. She climbs up on, you know, through the tire and everything. She jumps right in. The truck starts and he takes off. She's like, go! Go! And Leatherface just barely nips her. You know, it looks like he nips her in the hair. You know, throwing the chainsaw. And he's chasing after her, right? You know, with the whole chainsaw and everything like that. Go! Go! And eventually he stops, like he's all pissed off and defeated. And then she starts laughing. And as, you know, the truck driver's driving away, he's turning around looking like, what the fuck just happened, man? And while that's going on, I love the ending of this because originally, Tobe Hooper, the director, he wanted, you know, Gunnar Hansen as Leatherface to kind of stomp his feet and be all pissed off. Well, Gunnar Hansen, he didn't like the condition, him and the other actors, they didn't like the conditions that they were working in because, you know, they all had to be decked out, you know, in these costumes and everything, their wardrobe. It's the Texas humid heat, and they're having to do this, you know, with real live parts, you know, like all the animals and everything, and all the dead skeletons, they all smell because they were all real. And what he did is kind of like a wink or a payback, was that instead of stomping his feet, he got the chainsaw, and he did the iconic chainsaw dance, where he gets the chainsaw and he's flipping all around, and does a little twirl, and the film ends. And it's like, oh shit, this was a great fucking film. You know, I personally love this film. I mean, it's dated, you know, at this point, which is why they've gone back and done so many various different remakes over the years. You know, they did the Jessica Biel remake, and, you know, Sci-Fi, they try to do like a pre-Leatherface kind of remake, and you know, what they did with Texas Chainsaw 3D, I love that concept because it was very similar to what they recently did with Halloween. They show what happens after all that, where, you know, the sheriff comes and the house burns down, all the family members get killed off except Leatherface, and they continue the story. I personally love this film because it's so iconic, and the way that they built this film, it was originally meant to be an independent film, you know, because it had such a low budget. And eventually what they started doing with this film, you know, Tobe Hooper, he went through hell and back to get this film done. Not only did they have to work and film this in such crazy ass conditions in Texas, you know, in the heat, but the fact that they originally only started with like $60,000, that's all they had. And eventually once they started, you know, filming and doing everything, they ran up another $80,000 bill. And when it was time to collect the bill, they were like, shit, okay, well, we can't pay for it. So eventually what they did, they sold off tons of the rights to various different, you know, production companies. They said, okay, well, you own 10% because you gave us this amount. You own like 15, 20% and vice versa. And that's how they, you know, paid off this film to get it funded. And with this film being released, various different people held on to the license. It wasn't until later on in the mid 80s, around 85, 86, that's when they made a sequel, you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And it does loosely cover, you know, from the original, from this film. But with this film, I love this film because it's so original, so tried and true and classic. It was the birth of the slasher film because at this time, most of the horror films, they were all thriller. You know, they all follow the Hitchcock method of less is more. You know, as I was saying with the, you know, hanging on the meat hook, or when Leatherface was chopping up, you know, Kirk with the chainsaw. They show that he gets it prepared, and then it shows like an outside shot where it looks like they're doing it, but they're not. And originally, Tobe Hooper was trying to do that method because he wanted this to be PG. Of all things, he wanted this film to be PG so everybody could see it. Unfortunately, though, when they ran it through the MPAA, they said, no, it's too terrifying. So they gave it a rated X, And eventually he had to go back and cut out some scenes of where you see like the real skeletons and shit hanging around. He cut out a couple of those scenes and they gave it a rated R. Which is why you don't see any blood in this film. Hardly any. I mean, if you see any, you see it like when Kirk first gets hit with a hammer and he's seizing out. You see that part. You see, you know, a couple of the other scenes here and there where the hitchhiker cuts his hand, but not enough to justify it as a gore film, if that makes sense. For me, I see this film as more suspense and thriller. And because of that, this film changed everything. And because of the success of this, later on you had films like The Town That Dreaded Sundown that follow that same method, where they said, okay, this is based on a real killings that happened, you know, in Texarkana, you know? And that film became a cult icon of itself. Eventually around in the 80s, 1980, when Friday the 13th came out, that was really like, okay, the slasher genre is here to stay. And originally this film wasn't called Texas Chainsaw. Tobe Hooper, he wanted to call this film Head Cheese. And the reason why he wanted to call it Head Cheese is because, you know, when they picked up the hitchhiker starts talking about, you know, when you kill the cattle, they save everything, you know, and he was talking about how they made head cheese. They scoop up all the stuff and they mash it all in and they make good head cheese out of it. And that was the original title of this film. Personally, I think it would have been a good title. I mean, it's not as catchy as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but, you know, head cheese is pretty cool, you know. Imagine the intro where it says that, you know, this will be forever known as the head cheese. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre did have a better ring to it. And the whole idea of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it came to Tobe Hooper because, you know, he was shopping at a hardware store, it was busy, and while he was waiting in line, he was getting impatient. And, you know, we all been there with holiday shopping and shit like that. It's like, you know, you got 50 people, they got one register going, like, how the fuck are we gonna get through this, right? He had that idea, and eventually, what he decided was that he was looking around this hardware store, and he's like, what's a good way to get through this line? And he just had a random thought where he's like, there's a chainsaw. Oh, that'd be cool. Use a chainsaw to get through people, you know? And that's where the idea of Texas Chainsaw Massacre had started. Pretty interesting, actually. And with the success of this film later on, a lot of these actors, you know, they kind of did a lot of other small roles. They did a lot of TV roles and things like that. Tobe Hooper, he went on to become one of the best horror movie directors out. Later on, he went and did Poltergeist with Steven Spielberg, which is another iconic film, right? But the whole thing with this film, and the reason why I see this as a Thanksgiving film, because you see, they're all brothers, and they have a grandpa. And, you know, granted, they all fight and bicker like how we all do normally, and normal family does on Thanksgiving. But they all stay together. That's the crazy thing. That's kind of the ha-ha dark humor joke that I had with this episode, was like, I need to do this episode for Thanksgiving. But thank you all for tuning in to episode 55, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Hope you're enjoying those turkey leftovers, the good ball game on TV. Hell, you better save me that pumpkin pie, because I'm going to be coming over there right now for some. But anyways, guys, thank y'all, and I'll catch y'all next time, as always.